Hello, CIT 261. This is Sarah Broat, and I'm here to show you another walkthrough of my sandbox code. This week, I'm going to talk to you about local storage with a little bit of JSON thrown in. And without further ado, I'm going to go and share my screen. So I did something pretty simple this week, and first I'm going to just show you what it looks like in the browser. Now looking at this, it looks pretty much just like plain text, but if you take a look at some of the explanations, I've broken it down a little bit. So here you can see that I obviously have an array of the books of the Book of Mormon, but it looks a little strange. You can see the brackets and the commas and the quotation marks. And normally when an array prints to the browser in JavaScript, you wouldn't be able to see those things. So there's something a little bit different about this array. And then obviously I used an array length to tell you how many books there are. I used an index to tell you what book it is where Christ visits the Nephites. And here we get a little bit further down and I explain why that first array looks so strange when you see this other one. It's because that first array had actually been converted into a string using JSON so that I could feed it through local storage and store it. And then down here, I have just some information on prophets, who the first prophet of the restoration was and who our current prophet is. And that looks really simple, and like I could have just typed it in a paragraph, but I actually created that using JSON. So let's get to the actual code and you can see how I built all of this. So up here, I have a couple paragraphs with different IDs, and I'm going to use getElementById to feed the JavaScript into these different paragraphs. So here are my two arrays. I have one regular array like you would see in JavaScript, and that has the books of the Book of Mormon in it. And I named that one BOM for obvious reasons. And I'm going to focus on that one first and then come back to this second JSON array in a minute. So to get an array stored in local storage, if it's just a regular array and not a JSON array, you need to use the JSON stringify. So before we do anything else, if we're using local storage, we need to make sure that the browser that we're using to view it actually supports local storage. So if it does support local storage, then we move on to this next part. But if it doesn't, then it will print to the browser a message telling them that the browser does not support web storage. There are actually two kinds of local storage, and there's regular local storage, which I used here, and then there's session storage. Session storage only lasts as long as each session, so if you close the browser window, the data that you stored is not going to stay. But if you use local storage, when you close the browser window and open it up again, that information will still be there. So I used local storage here, and I used the setter, and I have that BOM variable, and I use JSON stringify, which turns the information in that array into a string and gives the string the name Book of Mormon. So now var BOM is the string Book of Mormon. And then we can retrieve that information by using a getter function and calling forth Book of Mormon. And then we can go over here and use a getElementById and feed that into the paragraph that has the ID result. And that's pretty straightforward. What we can also do after that, however, is turn the string back into an array. So how we do that is we take the same getter function that we used up here, the getItem and Book of Mormon, and we give it another name. Because it's one that we've retrieved earlier, we're going to set it as var retrieved, and then we're going to use the JSON parse as retrieved, and we're going to give it the name BOM2 because it's essentially the same array as BOM, just fed back through and reinterpreted. And so we can use that to go and print out all of this information like we would with a normal array that we couldn't do with a string. You can't get indexes from a string, you can't do a dot length with a string, things like that. And you can't print out the whole array as a string and not have that weird formatting that we saw at the very top of the page. So I added in some more JSON because it was fun to play around with, and these two topics go really well together, so I decided to combine them into one page. So up here I made a second array, and this is a JSON array. And with JSON, you give an array name, and then you have pairs of items that you turn into objects. So for instance, I decided, going with a theme, to do the prophets of the church. And as you can see, I named this array prophets. And I have, for each prophet, I have the first name and the last name. So index 0 would obviously be first name Joseph, last name Smith. Index 1 would be first name Brigham, last name Young, and so on and so forth, all the way down to Thomas S. Monson. And you can leave it as a normal index, or sorry, as a normal array, or you can set it to a variable, and then you can parse it and feed it through with get element by ID to the paragraphs like I did up top. So that was how I was able to turn each of them into objects. And as you can see, what you do is you take the array name and the index. So for Joseph Smith, that's 0 because he's the very first one. And I want his first name and his last name, so I concatenate it with his first name plus space, and then object, prophets, the index, which is 0, dot last name. So this is pretty straightforward, and again, JSON was not the focus of what I taught my classmates this week, but it was fun and it was appropriate to pair with local storage, so I added some more onto my page. If you have any questions about local storage, I didn't get too deep into it, but I did have some great resources, so I'll probably share those with the class community this week. Thank you so much for watching this video, and feel free to contact me if there's anything you want to talk about as far as local storage goes. Thanks, and have a good weekend.